Hi everybody and welcome back to our Game of Thrones reviews, and here in episode 5, The Door, a lot of stuff has happened, and whether you're a book reader or not, I just want to emphasise something. One of the biggest twists in the show to do with Hodor has been written by George R.R. Martin, and it's going to be in his forthcoming book, The Winds of Winter, but because obviously we're surpassing the books now, he's obviously gave certain information that's going to be needed for these character developments, and he's given it to the show writers, and that's why now that they're actually writing this episode, I've noticed whenever they're writing the episode, stuff's going to go down, and my god did it. And we're just going to kick straight in there, and we're going to start off with Sansa as she travels to Moletown to meet with Littlefinger. So we start off not actually in Castle Black, where it actually did start, but in Moletown, after Sansa receives a letter from Littlefinger asking her to meet him there. And he's already in this sort of broke down house or old store, and Sansa comes in with Brienne, and she lays it straight out in the line when he tries to come away with, "Oh, I came as soon as I heard you left Winterfell, and I'm so glad to see that you're okay." And she's like, well, she challenges that by saying, what do you mean okay? I'm not okay. Did you know about Ramsay? Because if you did, if you didn't know about Ramsay, I should say, then you're an idiot. If you did know, you're my enemy. So she's laying it right out there, and you can see that he's taken aback by it, but he's still sticking to his story that he didn't know anything about Ramsay. He didn't know how bad he was. And she lays it straight in the line. Do you know what he did? Can you guess what he did to me? What he did to me on my wedding night? And he guesses beating. And she says, oh yeah, he did beat me, but he would never touch my face because he needed my face because I'm the face of Ned Stark's daughter, and he didn't want to mess with that. But the rest of me, my body, yep, he beat me, and he beat me and more. And he obviously doesn't want to hear it. He obviously can guess the kind of things he's done just simply by her demeanour, but she tries to get him to guess, and it's in a way cruel for herself to have to go through this, but she's really sticking it to him. And he says, did he use a knife? Did he cut you? I should say. And she's like, oh well, you did know about him. And he says, no, I didn't, I swear I didn't. And she says, you know what? You rescued me from the people that murdered my family, and then you took me and left me with more people that, murdered my family. And what he did to me was awful, and you as a brothel owner should know the kind of things he did. I mean, I can still feel it. And all the time he's kind of like entranced, he can't look away, he's trying to convince her that he had nothing to do with it, and the second he did, he decided that he was going to come and rescue her with Knights of the Vale, but obviously by the time he got up here in the north, she was already escaped and with Jon. And she says, what he did to me, it's still with me, I can feel it in my body, and I don't mean like in my little heart of hearts, I can still feel the horrible things he did. I can actually feel what he did to me, what he did inside me. And there's been some talk on the internet on, is she pregnant? Do you think she might be pregnant? I'm not really so sure. I think that's the furthest thing from her mind, but I do think that obviously when people say, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never harm me, right? But what he did to her, no matter how long it took in the moment, it's still with her. The emotional damage is still with her. And she says, I've had enough of you, I don't trust you, and I'll win back the north with my brother Jon, I don't need your help. And he counters that he's just your half-brother. And it's kind of like he's trying to get her back on his side by trying to demote Jon in her eyes. And at this point, everything that's happened, she's never going to diverge from Jon. And he realises he's lost her, that she's not going to listen to him, that all the different reasonings he could try and spin round, it's not going to work on Sansa, it's too far gone. So he says, can you just let me tell you one thing? And this is his parting thing. He says, your great uncle, the Blackfish, has retaken Riverrun, and that'll be a great army for you. And she says, well, we already have an army. And he says, yeah, your brother's army, half-brother's army. And like I said, it's like he's trying to shake her faith with Jon, maybe to bring her back to him, because deep down I do believe that he is enamoured with her. He might even believe he's in love with her, but all stems from the fact that she looks a lot like her mother, and like some people say, she's baby cat, right? But she's like, I don't need your help, you can go. And he leaves. Now, as much as I would like to believe that he didn't think that Ramsay would be horrible to her, I think he actually thought that Roose Bolton would keep him in check, regardless of how much or how little he knew. But at the end of the day, it didn't happen that way. She was left to a monster. What this actually brings up for me, although I don't know what he's going to do next, what did he do between after he left her at Winterfell with the Boltons and then he went to King's Landing? What happened between King's Landing when he told Cersei that she was marrying a Bolton, and what happened between then and now? What's he been doing? That just, as much as I'm really proud of Sansa and her being strong and showing that she's not going to take any crap and that she feels wronged, and quite rightly she has been, she's not going to fall for his silvery slick words, but it just made me think, what has he been doing in the interim, and how is that going to affect whatever little plots he's got now that Sansa's kind of out of his control or influence? So we return back to Castle Black, and Sansa's back there with Jon, Ed, Melisandre, Tormund, Sir Davos and Brienne and Pod, and they're basically trying to figure out who they can get on their side. Now, potential allies wise, we've got House Manderly, you've got House Mormont, the Hornwoods, the Glovers, the Cerwyns and the Mazins. Now those last four are actually minor houses, but they reckon that with a lot of the minor houses, if they all go behind the Starks, they might actually have a chance against the Boltons, the Umbers and the Karstarks, because although Sansa says, well, the Umbers are dead to me, they can all hang because they brought Rickon to Ramsay, you know, the Karstarks might actually be someone that we can get on our side. And Davos, who actually, he makes a good point. He says, I may not know the North, but I know men. And considering that they lost their head of the house because Robb executed him before, that's another reason why they're probably going to stick with the Boltons. And anyway, if certain other houses were loyal, they would have stood up behind the Boltons before when they took Winterfell. So they're basically coming to this conclusion that, you know, if they can get behind a real Stark like Sansa, and actually because Jon, although a bastard, he is the recognised son of Ned Stark, just as much as Ramsay was a bastard in the Bolton house. It looks like basically they've got an uphill battle to climb. They realise that they need to basically go out there and unite all these little houses and get them behind their cause. So after laying out the potential allies that they can get behind their banners to fight the Boltons, the Umbers and the Karstarks, Sansa reveals, oh but wait a minute, we can also get the Tullys. Now they may be from the Riverlands and they're not a northern house, but they're our family and they'll get behind us and we can use their army. And at that point Sir Davos is like, last time I checked, you know, there was nobody for the Tullys. And she says, no, I found out from one of Ramsay's raven before I left Winterfell that my uncle, great uncle, the Blackfish, is back in Riverrun and we can really use them. And actually Sir Davos even says, oh that's great because the Blackfish is a legend. There's a moment where Brienne looks at her as if to say, so she didn't want to admit where she got that information. And actually what happens is after this little conflab where they have this meeting, Brienne actually challenges her. She's like, so why didn't you mention the fact that you got that information from Littlefinger? You think she's going to answer, but she doesn't. Sansa took Brienne aside because she's tasking her with a mission to go to the Blackfish and ask for his help, because she doesn't trust ravens, because Ramsay might intercept it, and actually that's where she's right. So just before they're leaving, they get ready to go, and you see Sansa looks refreshed, and she's wearing a dress that she actually made herself. And as you can see, it looks great. You actually see the Stark emblem, the sigil of the direwolf, and you're like, yeah, all those harken back to the first episode. It's true. All those lessons of doing all the needlework, which our sister Arya was crap at, actually came in handy, because she creates this beautiful dress, and she looks more Stark than she's ever been since like the first season, and I think she's really proud to be that way. And she even makes Jon a fur cloak, and she gets this leather sort of straps, and she actually has the direwolf sigil, and I think he's really, really taken aback by that, and actually you see him smile, and it's the first time. It's like a real happiness knowing that he has family, he has someone on his side, someone that cares about him, that wants to reinforce the fact that he's not just a bastard, he's not just like he was the Lord Commander. He's happy because he is a Stark. Now I know there's the whole story about, is he L plus R equals J? It doesn't matter. There is one thing, if you remember from just before Jon leaves for the Wall, and he asks Ned about his mother. He said he was going to tell him about it, obviously that didn't happen, but he says, just remember, you have my blood. He is a Stark. Now whether it's from his mother's side or his father's side, we'll find out. And we cut to a little moment where Tormund is, actually just before it cuts to this side shot, you see them from the front all lined up on their horses, and he's staring at her then, and when it cuts to the side, he just keeps looking at her, and when she looks at him, she just sort of goes, oh god, and she looks away. Now I'm not sure if it's going to be an actual storyline or if it's just going to be a mild fancy, but I quite like it, I really enjoy it. You see that Jon says to Ed, just don't knock it down while I'm gone, as if to say he will come back. Now I don't think he's coming back as a brother, I don't think he's a brother anymore, but he's still going to come back because he sees Ed as family. So hopefully it's just that. I just hope that he's not going to do this, and then when everything's set up where the Winterfell is back in control of the Starks, that he's just going to go back to the brothers, the Night's Watch. I hope not. But actually it's great to know that I think they're just accepting the fact that Ed is going to be Lord Commander. And there's actually the end scene where after they've left, one of the other brothers comes up to Ed and says, should we shut the gate? And he says, shut the gate, Lord Commander? And he says, yeah, shut the gate. And he was kind of reticent at first because he didn't think himself as the Lord Commander, but he is, and I think he'll be a good guy. That stoicism will help him. And obviously we're dividing up the two different camps. We've got Brienne and Pod, they're going to ride to the Riverlands, and we've seen that in the trailer where you see the banners behind them of the Tully banner with the fish. And so they're on that sort of diplomatic mission. Hopefully that it doesn't hurt the storyline, that Brienne will have something to prove that she's coming on Sansa's behalf, because I wouldn't like for her to show up and then it just turns into them being the prisoners at Riverrun. And then on the other hand, you've got Jon, Sansa, Melisandre, Sir Davos, Tormund, and you actually see some other wildlings walk out with them. So they're going off to find northern allies, and I really hope we go to Bear Island, because I'm dying to see the lady that's running it. Actually, she's a lot younger, and she was the one that wrote that letter last season that I mentioned earlier, and I would just love to see Bear Island. So overall, I was really happy with the scene. It's finally, you've got an idea of what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and now they've actually left the wall, and it's the first time we're going to see Jon going south for the longest time, because actually the only place he's been south is Winterfell that we've seen in the series, so it's going to be great to see him moving around the north. In this next scene, we return to Braavos, and I really, really enjoyed this. It was really refreshing. Although it started off as something we were used to, the Waif is fighting with Arya, and Arya obviously now has her sight back, so it's a bit more fair game, but she never really gets the heads up and basically overcomes and gets one over on the Waif. There's a moment when Arya gets knocked down and the Waif is getting ready to walk off, and she keeps mocking her about how she's you should maybe just go back home, go back to Westeros while you can, Lady Stark and everything. And she refuses to let go, and Jaqen shows up and says, well, she does have a point, because the Faceless Men were slaves. They were slaves from the time of Valyria, and they left Valyria and they came and settled and created Braavos and the House of Black and White, because the people that were the Faceless Men were not highborn ladies and men. He then says to her, I've got a new job for you, and this is a test. This is your third chance. This is like your second chance. There will be no third. And basically hands her a vial of poison and tells her there's an actress called Lady Crane and she's the target. He wants her to go check her out. So she goes, and it's the first time you see her really happy. She sees this caricature of the happenings in Westeros, basically season 1. And you see Joffrey and Cersei, and the woman that plays Cersei is Lady Crane. And I really enjoy the fact here that they're mocking the whole Robert thing, and she's laughing at that point. But then Ned Stark comes in, and he comes in as being greedy and ruthless, but he also comes off as gormless, kind of stupid. And obviously Tyrion's there, and he's made to look even uglier with a hook nose, making him look evil. And as you watch, you see how upset she's getting, and obviously she's trying to be a faceless person, and it just seems that they're just reinforcing the fact that she's Arya Stark, even in the first fighting scene. And then she comes here and she sees basically her life being played out, and it's not how it was, and she's getting really upset by it. And there's even a part when they're executing Ned Stark, everybody's laughing, and then the Sansa character comes on, and her character's her dress is ripped off and her breasts are bared, and they're basically like shaming her, and it's really sad. And obviously it just makes her relive the actual moment which we see here, and it was much more tragic and terrifying. And then it cuts to the back scenes, and we have our first cock shot that I think we've ever seen, and it's basically the guy who was Joffrey talking about the warts he's got in his genitals, and it kind of takes the levity back. It kind of makes it funny after it being so serious. And really good point, as I noticed it, I says, that guy who's playing Robert Baratheon, he looks familiar. It's Richard E. Grant. He's an amazing actor. I absolutely love that. He's probably a big fanboy, and that's the reason why he got the part, which I love. I hope we see him again. And what we see is Lady Crane is actually a very nice woman, and she gets on well with everybody, and she's flirting with the guy that played Tyrion, and you find out that she's the only one that drinks rum, and Arya gets the idea that that is the way to poison her. But I don't know if she's actually going to go through with it, because she ends up seeing Jaqen later on, and she's surmising, I think it's the younger actress that was complaining about only having 3 lines, her that played Sansa. And Jaqen says, it doesn't matter, you're just supposed to do it. It's not all about bad people getting killed, good people die as well. We're just paid to do a contract, and you're going to do it. The whole thing is she going to do it? Because I think this whole convergence of the Waif going on about how she's Arya Stark, and then seeing the replays of one of the horrible moments in her life, it's like she's never going to be able to forget, even if she tried, because she's always going to see the slights that were against her family, and to avenge that she has to be Arya Stark. And she is Arya Stark. We know what's going to happen. She's going to go back and she's going to kick some ass. So we return to the Iron Islands on Pike, where Yara is making her claim for the throne, and she stands up and says, I'm going to make us great again. We're going to go around, we're going to reave, we're going to make a mark on the Westeros, because they just think that we're something to be swatted away and that we're useless and we will never make a claim or anything. She's basically pushing forward for the mother of all reaves, and that they're going to make this mark, right? And she makes this rousing good speech, but a guy comes up and says, well, why should we have a queen when we've never had one before? And anyway, Balon's own male heir is right next to you. And Theon is quiet at this point, and you're thinking, oh crap, maybe he's going to turn around and change his mind and betray her. But he doesn't. He gets up and he says, you know what, she's a warrior, she's a reaver, she's the real Ironborn, and she'll lead us. And she is our queen. And there's already support there for Yara, right? Bear in mind that she has her own ships and she's reaved with many a man, and they're all shouting her name, and it sounds great, right? And then all you hear is from the side, this is Euron coming in, and he says, no, I claim the Salt Throne. I'm the one that can lead us, because everything's went to shit anyway. And Yara actually challenges him, the fact that he shows up then. She says, I suspect you killed my father. And he says, yeah, I did. I'll give you this. I didn't expect that. He just said, yes, I did kill your father. But you know what? He's ruined everything. And look where we are. A woman as a choice or a guy with no cock? Screw that. So in the end, he ends up getting it. He's going to become king. And they've got him in the shallow rock pool thing. And they drown him, like the expression goes. And the whole point is they drown you. And if you come back and are alive, you come back harder and stronger, and that proves that you're worthy, because if they do this drowning ceremony and you don't come back, you were never worthy. And this is how they this is the coronation for a king. And like this is what is dead may never die, but rises again harder and stronger, right? But he's crazy as fuck. And they put this crown on him, this driftwood crown, and one of the first things he said, which was really naff, oh, where's my niece and nephew, expecting they'll be standing there celebratory for him. And he says, oh well, let's go find them and kill them. And they go charging up the hill to try and find out where they are. And they come to this vantage point. Now meanwhile, Theon and Yara know that this isn't going to work out well. They need to get the hell out of Dodge. So they leave. And they've got a ton of ships. And I'm trying to count as many as I can. I'm thinking there's at least, 50. There's so many of them there. And obviously they know that's the best ships. They've went and took our best ships. And Euron tries to change the subject and he says, well, get every man, woman and child making nets and sails and chop down every tree. The way I see it is there can't be that many trees on there. It would probably take quite a while for him to do that. But he says, once we get this fleet of ships, the whole point is I'm going to go across to Daenerys Targaryen, who's the mother of dragons, and she's really hardcore. I'll join with her and marry her, and we'll come back to Westeros and rule it together. Now, I know he's thinking that. He's thinking he can pledge, but what does he have to give her? Except for crazy eyes, and they don't respect women anyway. She would never accept him in her Nelly Puff, right? But that's his idea. It's an interesting end of the arc, figuring out that he's the king. I'm more interested to see what Theon and Yara are going to do. I think they're going to try and cut him off by going over to Daenerys first and basically telling her what's what. And I don't think even anyway, if he came pledging himself to her, she's never going to take him because he's an asshole. So we return back to Vaes Dothrak, and obviously we've had the Khals all killed by Dany and we're dealing with that. And this scene really isn't a big scene, there's no real plot development in it, but it gives you a major payoff because Daenerys is meeting with Jorah and Dario's there, right? And you see in the picture, he just looks like a spare part. Ignore him, he's not important. So basically she says, I've sent you away twice, I've banished you twice, and twice you've came back. But you saved my life. So it's obviously, I can't take you back and I can't send you away. And she starts to walk towards him. Now I'm not sure what she was going to do, whether she was going to reach out and touch him or thank him for saving her life. But as she walked, she literally only makes a couple of movements towards him, and he just pulls back. And he says, you have to let me go. I have to go. I can't stay. And that's when he shows the basically the extent of the greyscale up his arm. And she doesn't know it as greyscale, or she doesn't acknowledge it as that. But she says, I'm so sorry. How long does it take? And she says, I don't know. It could take a long time, don't know. Is there a cure? He says, I don't know. He says, but I have to leave. And she's really apologetic to him, and you see here, she looks absolutely devastated. And the thing is there's this unspoken thing between them, whereas she's trying to do the right thing when he betrayed her before to send him away. even though in her heart of hearts she wants him there, because he's the only one that's been with her since the beginning. People have came and gone and died, and she's went from being this poor little, you know, like this defenseless type girl to this strong Khaleesi queen, and she's really upset at the thought of losing him. And what I really enjoy is that he finally admits, he says, Tyrion Lannister was right. And he looks down when he says it. He says, I love you. And he starts to look back up and he says, I'll always love you. He says, but I have to go. And obviously she's stunned at silence. She doesn't know what to say. And I think she loves him, but she doesn't love him that way. And obviously she's stunned to silence at this point. And he just turns away and he says, goodbye, Khaleesi. And finally she pipes up and she says, no, you're not leaving, and I'm not going to let you leave me. I'm going to order you to go off and find a cure, because see, when I rule the Seven Kingdoms, I want you by my side. And I truly believe that. She wants him there, because she wants that full circle of how she started off to how she's hopefully going to end all this being the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. And he's got this happiness and fulfillment, and we're basically going to finish up with this whole friend zone thing. We've laid our cards out on the table. We know what's what. He's going to hopefully come back. Now, whether or not that happens or not, I suspect he might not make it, or he might just make it to the point where she's going to make to the Seven Kingdoms, but hopefully he does come back. But it ends with her leaving with the Dothraki horde at her back, and he's watching them leave, and he's going to leave off on his own journey, and it's like a to be continued kind of thing. I really hope he shows back up, because I really love Ian Glenn, who plays Ser Jorah, because he's a hot piece of menace. But hopefully we'll get to see him again. But now I'm more than happy. I don't know if it's going to happen next week, but I'd love to see her back in Meereen next week. Probably won't. We might not see her next week, we might not see her till the week afterwards, but I can't wait to see everybody in Meereen, see her show up with all these Dothrakis at her back. So we return to Meereen, and it's been 2 weeks since the peace pact has been made, and they're just basically want to take stock. So Varys asks Grey Worm, has there been any attacks from the Sons of the Harpy? He says no. He says, what about the masters? Have any masters been butchered by the freemen? And he says, only 2 were killed, but that was on the day of the pact, so that doesn't matter anyway. Tyrion comes in like a bucket of cold water and says, well, that's not enough, you know. It's not enough that we have peace. And Varys is like, well, we're avoiding a civil war, so obviously it is enough. And he says, no, we need to find a way to prove to the people that Daenerys is the one that brought them the peace. So they end up inviting Kinvara, right? Now Kinvara is basically Melisandre from over in Essos. She's just another red priest, but maybe she's not just a red priestess, if you know what I mean. She's from the Red Temple in Volantis, and they want to spread the word, and they want to use someone the people can trust. So that's why he invited the red priest, because actually, if you remember in episode 1 of season 6, there was a red priest that Tyrion and Varys walked by, so they've obviously got support in Meereen, and he wants her to be the one to spread the word, because he believes that she's someone that isn't bought and that they'll take her word for it. And she's like, yes, I'm very happy to do it, because I believe that she is the prince that was promised. Now, Varys, being skeptical of anything like that, said, you know, he's skeptical of people that practice magic and all this scary religion. And he points out that Melisandre, someone similar to yourself, thought that Stannis was the prince that was promised. And actually, he was beaten twice, and he was beaten in the Battle of the Blackwater by the man standing next to me, aka Tyrion. And Kinvara says that, you know, there is a plan. The Lord of Light does have a plan, but some humans, you know, some people make mistakes. But then she kind of unnerves Varys by revealing that she knows that he was emasculated by a second-rate sorcerer, in her words, who used your parts and burnt them in the fire. And she says in a really creepy tone, do you remember what he said? Do you remember what the voice said? Can you tell me who spoke to you from the flames? And Varys doesn't say a word, and that's his face. He's just completely unnerved. And she says, I can tell you what he said. I know who said that to you. And obviously, how the hell did she know that? Because it was mentioned before in the episode where Varys had the sorcerer in the crate and he spoke to Tyrion, but by any means he wouldn't have told anybody else. She basically shuts him up by saying that, but she also, it just proves that she can put the whammy on someone by just saying a few words. But she says to Tyrion that she'll send out preachers and priestesses that'll go out and spread the word. I think that is a good thing. I don't think she's going to betray them or anything like that, because if she believes Daenerys is the right person and she's the prince that was promised, because prince in Valyrian doesn't necessarily mean male, it can be male or female. So the fact that she believes in Daenerys means that she wouldn't betray Varys and Tyrion in any way at this moment in time anyway. So she's just doing the same thing that we remember from Melisandre. She's a bit creepy. They know that she's got power, and the fact that she managed to unnerve Varys with words and knowledge proves that there's something more to her than just a girl or a woman in a dress. So here we are in our Beyond the Wall scenes, and there's 3 different sections, and we'll go through it section by section. So it starts off with Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven purposely in a vision to learn something, because obviously there's a lot of stuff that the Three-Eyed Raven wants to teach Bran, and this is one of the visions that he's brought him through from the past, and it's actually thousands of years ago in the past, at least 10,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago if I mind right. Now this is, they walk through these standing stones, and from above you see these standing stones in a spiral pattern. Now we've seen these all through the series to do with various points, to do with the White Walkers, with the dead bodies, dead horses, different, and it's all to do with this spiral pattern. And this is quite a revelation, because it's not the White Walkers, it's the children of the forest. They're at the weirwood tree surrounded by these standing stones, and you see these children of the forest, and the one on the far left is Leaf, is the one that we're used to seeing, and she picks up an obsidian dagger or dragon glass, and she walks over towards a tree, and up against this tree she has a captive, right? Now the captive is one of the first men that came to Westeros during the Dawn Age, which I did a video on, and I'm pretty sure this is the Night's King, right, or the Night King, and it looks like she's just sacrificing a man. But as she pierces the dagger in, she doesn't just stab him multiple, she pushes it in, and then she uses the palm of her hand to push it directly into the centre of his chest, and the crunching and the noise, it's really good when you listen to it, especially with earphones, and you look up and you see the eyes turn blue. Now I'm pretty sure that this is the creation of the first White Walker, and actually the Night King. I'm sure this is the same actor outside of the makeup, and this is the revelation that the children of the forest created the first White Walkers and created this whole race. And when Bran sees this part, he just jumps out from the vision and he just looks at Leif, who I think has been expecting this revelation to come, and he's like, it was you. You created the White Walkers. And she says it in this sort of pleading tone and kind of apologetic, but also with an edge of hardness, to go, well, they were killing us all. The first men came and they were killing us and chopping down our trees. We had to do something. It was all because of you, man. And that's a revelation, right? That's where it comes from. The only thing that makes me wonder is it took a piece of obsidian to make the White Walkers, but they're also, if they were to be hit or stabbed by a piece of dragon glass, it would kill them, that we know of. So there must be power in it to make them, but the thing that made them can also destroy them. And the thing about dragon glass, aka obsidian, is as sharp as it is when you use it a certain way, it can also be quite fragile in a way at certain angles because of the way it's cut. And I think that's why when they're destroyed, they shatter the way dragon glass shatters as well. So this next section is basically the catalyst and the precursor for all the crap that's going to happen, right? So Bran decides to go and have a vision by himself without the guidance or help from the Three-Eyed Raven. And I don't know how he came across this vision, but anyway, he sees the weirwood tree and the standing stones that he saw earlier for where the creation of the White Walker was made. And it's totally covered in snow. Winter is definitely here. And when he turns around, he sees a massive amount of whites just standing in a big massive group. God knows how many thousands there are of them. And because he feels safe and he's a bit bold, he decides to walk over. And as he walks over, he sees all the different whites in various stages of like decay, and you can see that the army's made up of wildlings and probably ancient first men, and very probably, although I tried to have a look out for some brotherhoods, you know, the Night's Watch, you mostly see quite a lot of wildlings, but basically there's all these dead people. And he walks through and he turns around and he sees 4 of the White Walkers. These are the powerful beings. The whites are just the reanimated corpses, and he sees them all mounted on horses. And obviously he's just awestruck and terrified, but he feels safe. So he looks at them and notice they start to turn around. And he sees the blue eyes of the Night's King. And it's not like he suspects, oh, maybe they might see me. He knows they can see him. He can just tell. And he becomes terrified. And he looks behind him and he sees all the whites' gazes look upon him, and then he realizes, this is it, this is bad, I'm stuck, I'm all on my own, I need to get out of here. And when he senses something behind him, the Night King that was previously on a horse is now standing right behind him, and he reaches out and he touches Bran on the arm. And this causes Bran to pull out of the vision, and he starts screaming, and it wakes everybody up. It wakes Hodor, it wakes Mira, it wakes the Three-Eyed Raven, and he just keeps saying, he saw me, but then he says, what happened, did he see you? He says, the Night King touched you, and he says, oh, I don't know if he touched me. Yeah, he bloody touched it. Talk about trying to pull back and everything. He tries to wheedle his way out of it, and he says, he's left his mark upon you. And you see his arm, as you can see here, he's got the actual icy tendrils of the Night King's hand on his skin, and I'm unsure how this means that being marked, but the Three-Eyed Raven states it plain, you've been marked, he can now enter the cave, you know, he's coming, there's no time, it's now time for you to become me. He says, but I thought I wasn't ready. He says, you're not ready. And immediately his eyes turn white and he's sucked into what I can only assume is him downloading the Three-Eyed Raven's matrix. You just get this sense of urgency that all things are going to go completely wrong, all because Bran decided to go for a little vision walkabout. So the episode comes to an end in these final scenes, and it actually starts off kind of nice. Mira's talking about how great it'll be to get south and be warm and not have to worry about eating just things like moss, and she starts to talk about eggs and bacon and blood sausage, aka black pudding if you're from this side of the pond. And it's really nice because they're smiling happy, and you actually see Hodor very happy because you can tell he wants to eat some decent food, but you get this deep sense of foreboding that talking about nice things happening is never going to end well, because you know something bad's going to happen, and it does. And Mira notices her breath being really heavy and visual in the cave, and it's really cold, right? So she runs out the front and she sees a whole army of the dead, the undead, and the White Walkers leading it, and Leaf tells her to go back inside and get Bran and escape. Now meanwhile, Bran's inside a vision at Winterfell, and he's obviously uploading all this consciousness and all the stuff from the Three-Eyed Raven, but he is completely, at this point, oblivious to the fact that they're under attack. And then it cuts back to the front of the cave, and there's the children of the forest, including Leaf, are trying to defend. So they start to throw those magical projectile orb things, and it blows up some of the whites behind, but they're still coming. So they throw one of the magical projectiles at the sort of wicker, reedy sort of border that's the edge of their magic here, and they're standing there, and they set it on fire. Now we all know the whites can't go near fire and that fire actually kills them. But this does little effect on the White Walkers, who just walk, and they walk completely through it. They don't slow down, and as they touch the area of fire, it starts to just sizzle and it stops being fiery, and they can just keep walking through it. And they just pass through like this photo shows. And you're like, oh shit, this is getting really bad. So Leaf tries to run back inside, and the other children of the forest are trying to protect the rest of them as well. But whilst the White Walkers can get through the actual cave entrance, the Whites climb up over the cave and start to smash at the roots of the tree to try and get in. So as Bran is inside this vision, he's completely oblivious to everything going on outside. The White Walkers are already starting to breach the cave, and the roots system above them is being penetrated by the whites. I'm not completely sure, but whilst he's obviously downloading a lot more than what we're being shown, what he actually is perceiving is the moment that Ned Stark is saying goodbye to his father, Lord Rickard Stark, before he leaves to go to be fostered by Jon Arryn in the Eyrie. And I think this is kind of foreshadowing the moment that obviously the Three-Eyed Raven is having to say goodbye to Bran, because the Three-Eyed Raven can't leave with Bran. He is stuck there hell or high water, and I think maybe the Three-Eyed Raven also suspected that this was the end for him anyway, and that although it came sooner than he anticipated, he still has to prepare Bran as much as he can. And obviously he himself is really vulnerable at this point. And as the whites break in from above, they start to attack some of the children of the forest, and some of them die. Now I think there's only about 5 or 6. They're the same number that were there at the time they created the White Walker, and some are using spears, and one has a weirwood bow. And all this time Meera's trying to wake up Bran, and she's trying to get Hodor to come as well. And at this point, the way Hodor is underneath violence is that he kind of freezes up. He's not as much as he's physically imposing, he doesn't actually get up there and do violence unless Bran wargs into him. And that's at the moment when Bran hears Meera yelling for him to warg into Hodor, and at that moment he looks over at Hodor as Willis. He starts to warg into him, present Hodor, and Hodor starts to drag Bran away. And at this point, Summer jumps in and protects Meera by attacking some of the oncoming whites. Now this moment here specifically is the moment where you're like, well, Summer, just run after her, boy, just run after her and escape. But at this point, Summer is also an analogy, I believe, for that summer is over, winter is coming. Some people have been thinking that, but also at the same time, Summer was never going to just abandon the threat and run. The wolf is not like that at all. With his last moments, Summer attacks a whole bunch of whites, and although they overcome him, he did his job. He is the epitome of a very good boy, and you just remember that, and he will be avenged. Don't you worry about that. But yes, I was very upset. Another dire wolf dead. But at the end of the day, you've got to think it this way. He was protecting his masters, he was protecting who he loved and cared about. So as the others are making their escape down the tunnel, the Night's King and 2 of the White Walkers come in, and obviously the Three-Eyed Raven can't leave. And I suspect he always knew that this was going to happen. And it cuts to inside the vision, and his last words are, "The time has come, leave me." And then the Night's King strikes him down in reality, but inside the vision he just disintegrates into ash and pieces of cloth, and I thought that was quite visually beautiful considering it was a death. At this point I'm already heartbroken, okay? And you see the tunnel, and they're not just running along the ground, they're running up around the edges and the walls and the roof of the tunnel, and they're running so quick and scrabbly they remind me of like crabs or something. And you see Leaf, and she tells Meera to just keep going, that she'll just stay behind, and she takes one of the last orbs from within her person, and it starts to glow bright blue even though it's an incendiary device, and she's holding it, and they engulf her, and it becomes real. I just remember vividly, it was just beautiful but so horrible hearing the squelching. And this is the last shot you see of her as they're stabbing her multiple times, and then the explosion goes off and quite a lot of them are going to be killed. At this point in the vision, Bran hears Meera shout for Hodor to keep holding the door because they've made it outside and it's just them three left. And Meera's pulling away Bran. And in that moment, Bran looks at young Hodor, Willis, and as he hears hold the door, and bear in mind he's trying to control Hodor in the present to hold the door, and Willis starts to seize and land on the ground, and old Nan's holding on to him. He's like, what's the matter, Willis? What's the matter? And he starts to echo the words Meera's saying, hold the door, hold the door. At this point, Hodor is not just pushing it, it's like, what I think has happened is his consciousness and his previous consciousness have been stretched so thin, and Bran is trying to make Hodor hold the door in the present, but he's also got past Hodor's consciousness as well, and it's kind of like a rubber band, and it's being pulled, and he's trying to focus on the present Hodor but also trying to focus on this hold the door. And I think because he's still stuck in the vision, his consciousness is being shredded in a way, and that the elastic sort of the consciousness is being pulled back. And in that moment, and even the actor who plays Hodor seems to think, at the moment that young Willis, aka Hodor, starts shouting, hold the door, hold the door, hold the door, it's the presence Hodor's consciousness being shoved or snapped back into the young self, and that Hodor is actually himself pushing on the door in his own moments, because it's a kind of clarity. I don't know why, I just seem to think that present Hodor, and how he can only say Hodor, is because obviously he's remembering the hold the door, and it's been merged, and all he could say was Hodor, and it's been stuck. And that's because of Bran's power of trying to control present Hodor and past Hodor, and it's caused damage to Hodor. But in this moment, this real fight in Hodor's face, him holding on to that door, I believe that is the real Hodor, aka Willis. He knows what he's supposed to do. He knows clarity that he has to hold the door, because Bran can warg into Hodor, but I think being in the vision and him affecting previous Hodor is really upset him, as you see in that picture. And Hodor is holding on to this without question, and that's because I think that's actually him, because I believe that if he started to get injured, and at this point in the present, some of the whites are breaking through the cave door and they're stabbing him in his side, he's being scratched and teared at, and at that moment I think that he would wake up if he was Bran in control, that would be kind of trauma he couldn't hold on to. And Meera is desperately trying to pull away Bran, who is still stuck in this vision, and he's witnessing what he's done, and he realises how severe what this all means is that he's tapped into both. It's caused Hodor to become Hodor. All you keep hearing is hold the door, and young Willis, aka Hodor, is shouting hold the door, but he's shouting it so long, and you can see the damage setting in, and you hear him, it changed from, and a lot of people noticed this as soon as they heard hold the door, that you could just hear it, it just made so much sense. Hold the door morphed into Hodor, so it went hold the door, hold the door, hold the door, hold the door, hold door, hold door, hold door. And you see, and I personally don't think that's Bran inside his head, I think that is Hodor, and he's holding on, and he knew this was going to happen in some way, shape or form, and that he's been transported. Meanwhile, you just see everybody around him in Winterfell. Old Nan is his granny, and you see them all watching, and he goes from hold the door to Hodor, and it just echoes on, and all you hear is Hodor. And that's the last vision you see. You see young Willis become into Hodor, and the present Hodor, who was Willis, gives up his life holding a door. And what I think this means is that really the only way that Bran could have had any control over Hodor was because of the damage he did. Because if he was damaged, because it's taboo in the green seeing and the warg is to do with the children of the forest, right? And that kind of ability, it's kind of taboo to warg into humans, and I think the reason why he always managed to warg into Hodor is because he's been compromised. He's not mentally challenged, he's just been compromised, and we didn't know why he was like that. I always thought it was to do with that scar on his head, because he was a stable boy and maybe he got hit in the head. It happens a lot. Horses sometimes buck and they might hit you in the head, and that's maybe the reason why he had an injury, and maybe that made him susceptible. But this revelation that Hodor came from the fact that he was trying to hold the door, all that, as much as I love the writers of the show and everything, that did not come from the writers. That came straight from George R.R. Martin. And it's nice to know that something as pivotal as Hodor dying and Hodor's creation of his name came from George R.R. Martin. And that's a bonus, right? Because bear in mind, as much as this is based on a book, just look at the titles. It's adapted from George R.R. Martin's book series, okay? It's not going to be canon and everything. We all know that certain things have been omitted and certain things have been added, so you just kind of have to accept certain things. But at this point, they're not going to kill off Summer, and they're not going to kill off Hodor just for the sake of it. It's part of the grand scheme, and we're all heading towards that end point. And I trust the writers and I trust George R.R. Martin to take us there, and it's not going to be pleasant. This isn't black and white. The good guys don't always win and the bad guys don't always die or go to jail. There's a hell of a lot of grey, and we just have to accept that. And remember, we dealt with the Red Wedding, and that was 3 years ago, so we're going to look back on this and we're going to have some sort of perspective. And hindsight's 2020, but we still have a lot more to go before we can look back and say, well, it was bad at that point, but look how it turned out in the end. Overall, I would give this episode a 9.5. It's not a 10 because it was massive enjoyment, but it was just so much meat on the bones that I felt complete watching it. And as much as it was painful in parts, sometimes we're a bit masochistic humans. We don't always like it to be perfectly happy haha jokes and a happy ending, so it was a mixed bag, but it was a good mixed bag. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it's went on a bit late and it took ages to come out. I'd love to hear your feedback, so like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you in the next one.